Hello travelers, truckers, and fellow troglodytes. It's the Big Heavy, and today I want to share with you how I saved a little over $8,000 on a 2021 Ford F-150 Powerboost truck. Now, our benevolent overlords at YouTube would tell me that I should throw out a provocative title like that and then go on prattling for 45 minutes about some semi-related things and ultimately give you some convoluted strategy that probably doesn't apply about how I pulled my truck from the bottom of the Long Island Sound, and other than it smelling like a bunch of sardines, it was a fabulous vehicle that I saved $8,000 on. But I'm not going to do that to you. So, short answer, and I'll flash some numbers up here so you get the exact figures. I spec'd out a Ford F-150. Again, it's a Powerboost. Smoked quartz is the color, has all the options, platinum. Super nice, love it. I would put some B-roll of the truck in right now, but it's raining and the truck looks kind of gross after having sat in the rain for a few days. So the sticker price when I configured the truck was a bit over $73,000. I think it was $73,550 or something like that. They actually raised the sticker prices just a little bit between when I ordered and when my truck actually arrived. And my negotiated price for the vehicle, and I'm looking at my cheat sheet right here, was $66,133. And then I got about $1,600 of rebates on top of that. So it came out right around an even $65,000 on a $74,000 truck. So pretty good savings. The only additional cost that I incurred for getting this vehicle was I purchased it from a company called Granger Ford in Granger, Iowa. And obviously I don't, or maybe it's not obvious, but I don't live in Iowa. So I had to fly out to Iowa, spend a night in a hotel, pay for a couple tanks of gas, several rounds of tolls on various state throughways to get myself home. So probably all in about $700-800 worth of extra costs that I picked up by going this route. The other cost took a couple days of my time. It was a 22-hour drive that I split up over 2 days. Stayed in a hotel in Granger after picking up the truck just so I'd be able to drive it around a little, make sure everything was shipshape before heading out on my long road trip, and then stayed with a family member about at the midpoint of that journey. So if you want similar savings, again, this company called Granger Ford, I'll put the email address of the gentleman I dealt with. He's a gentleman named Chip. He handles their internet sales. And what's interesting about these guys is their business model is to offer this truck at 3% below invoice. And I'll talk some more about invoice and all the different components that go into vehicle pricing, specifically around the Ford F-150. Their theory behind that, and you may say, why are these guys underpricing everyone else in the market, is a few things. So they only give you that pricing on special orders, as far as I know. They don't really have any trucks on the lot these days like most other dealers. So you have to special order the truck, they give you that price, you essentially wait in a normal time 6 to 8 weeks. These days, with the various shortages and madness that's going on with the supply chain, it's more like 8 to 12 weeks. In my case, it was right around that 12-week mark. I know some people waited longer, some people waited shorter, but the truck arrives at the dealer, they essentially turn it over immediately, they get credit for a sale, and what we'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about pricing is the invoice price to the dealer isn't really what they actually pay. For most brands, I believe Ford's included in this, the more vehicles a dealer sells, the more rebates they get, the more clout they get with the dealership. Essentially, it's the same as if, you and I both owned a banana stand and I sold 10 bananas a week and you sold 10,000, you would probably get better pricing on a per banana basis. So that's essentially the business model they're going for, which from a consumer perspective is pretty cool. It was the ultimate easy transaction. The process was by email. I think I gave Chip a ring at one point just to ask him some questions about the vehicles. He knew the product pretty well. I had never purchased a truck before, so he was able to give me some guidance that was ultimately helpful. And then I was able to sign a buying agreement via email. I had to call, I believe, to give him a credit card number. There was a $500 deposit. And then basically you kind of wait. Truck shows up, you get a call, you do some final processing, and Bob's your uncle. That's the short answer of how you too can save $8,000 or so on your F-150. If that's all you want, then again, I'll put Chip's email address somewhere around here, or just hit the Google machine and search for Granger Ford, and I'm sure you can find some sort of contact information there. I don't have any special relationship with those guys beside the fact that I gave them $60,000 for a new truck. If you do reach out to Chip, tell him the Big Heavy sent you. He has no idea who the Big Heavy is, so hopefully that will provide some amusement for all parties. That's the only thing I get out of it, is knowing that someone somewhere is confused and or having a laugh on my behalf. That's the short answer. So let's go into the long answer. let's talk some details about how vehicles get priced. And again, this is mostly general information, but I'll throw in a few specifics that I've picked up along the way for Ford. And I've bought probably a half dozen vehicles over my life, so these are kind of little tips and nuances I've picked up along the way. Now, the one key thing to understand that a lot of people don't actually realize is that Ford, or any automaker, and this applies in the United States at least, and the dealership are totally separate businesses. So I may own the Big Heavy's Ford dealership, and essentially I purchase vehicles from Ford as a consumer of theirs. Ford doesn't hold any economic interest in my dealership. Ford and I don't have any kind of special relationship beyond signing a franchise agreement. So it's very similar to something like a Chick-fil-A or a McDonald's, where there's a franchisee, so there's some local business person that owns that individual store, and they have to meet certain standards set by McDonald's or Ford or Chick-fil-A or whoever. They ultimately get the revenue, they make hiring and firing decisions, they're able to set pricing within certain parameters. So it's an independent business. Now, what that means from a consumer's perspective is what Granger is doing on their pricing, or what your local Ford dealer is doing on their pricing, may be completely different from another Ford dealer or another brand's dealer down the street. If I own a Ford dealership, I could sell trucks for $5 a piece if I wanted to. I would lose my shirt because Ford obviously is going to charge me more than $5 for those trucks to get them into inventory. But I can ultimately make pricing decisions and business decisions about how I want to price, how I want to market, how I want to sell. Again, as long as I'm within certain parameters set by the company. I probably couldn't go and say, Fords get 6,000 miles per gallon, or just make outrageously false claims, or do anything like that. So within those parameters, I can operate as an independent business. So again, that's important to you as a consumer, because what one dealer does may or may not reflect what another dealership does. It's also interesting to you as a consumer because you can shop around to different dealers. So just because a dealer is a Ford or a Chevy dealer or a Jeep dealer or whatnot, and they have the exact same vehicle with the exact same configuration that you want, does not mean that you're going to get the exact same price. So it behooves you to shop around and try some different things. And it might behoove you to hop on a plane and travel, 200, in my case, I think about 1,200 miles away, to another dealership in another state and pick up a vehicle if you can get a deal that merits that sort of drive. So delving into how these things are priced a little bit more, there's essentially 4 components that you need to worry about when you're negotiating the purchase of a new vehicle. The first component of those 4 that I mentioned is the actual price of the vehicle. So that's the price you see on the sticker in the window, which I recently learned is called a Maroney sticker. There's some auto trivia for you. The price that you see on the sticker is what's called the MSRP. That stands for Manufacturer's Suggested Retail Price. That's essentially the price that the manufacturer would ideally like to get. And that's the price that a lot of dealers will use as their starting point for negotiation. So they want to start you at MSRP and have you work down, which is a bit of a challenge because in that case, you're always asking for a concession from the dealer. You're asking, can you reduce this initial price that we offered? But what I would suggest, and this is not new or innovative advice, you'd find this anywhere that talks about car pricing, is that you start with what's called the invoice price. And the invoice price, theoretically, is what the dealer pays for the vehicle from the manufacturer. I say theoretically because that's not actually the case. You can kind of think of invoice as like a published, semi-official sticker price to the dealers, but there's dealer holdbacks, there's incentives, there's marketing funds, there's floor planning, there's a zillion different ways that dealers give money to, that the manufacturer gives money to dealers that lower that per vehicle cost. So even if you get a dealer to give you or to sell you the vehicle at invoice, they're still making money. So any dealer sales rep that, if you start at invoice and they say, I can't give you that price, I don't make any money, they're lying to you. So that's kind of piece 1. So in the case of Granger, the invoice price for the vehicle, and again, looking at my cheat sheet, was $68,728, and they gave 3% below invoice. That's kind of their deal. And that came out to that $66,133, and I'm dropping the cents off. So, if that math doesn't exactly work out, too bad, so sad. But if you're going to your local dealer and using someone else, by virtue of starting an invoice, then the dealer tends to talk you up versus you having to talk them down. And just psychologically, that's a little bit better of a position to be in. Start with that price as your negotiating point and start with invoice as your kind of starting offer. The trick that a lot of dealerships will do, I find this horribly shady and I understand why they do it, but frankly offends me a little bit, is they'll say, what do you want to pay per month? And that's just completely irrelevant. And the reason that's completely irrelevant, the reason that I find that to be quite a shady tactic, is I could have a vehicle that's, $50 or $50,000. And if I say I want to pay $10 a month, you can figure out a combination of interest rate, lease versus buy, and price that'll get me there. And in most cases, the dealer will inflate the price, sometimes even taking it above MSRP. They'll give you a horrible interest rate. They'll use a bad bank that gives them a better kickback and gives you a crappy interest rate. So they're passing the money onto you in the form of a bad interest rate, and they'll create this horribly long-term loan. So you might end up paying $80,000 on that $50,000 car over the course of an 8-year lease or something just completely bizarre and ridiculous. So anytime a car dealer says, what do you want to pay per month? Just tell him, I don't even want to talk about the number. I just want to talk about the final number. And if they press on it, they say, hey, I'm just trying to help you budget, and you're just trying to get a ballpark, an idea, just say that's none of your business. I'll worry about what I pay per month. Let's just talk about the price of the vehicle. Get your price set, start with invoice. I would, even if you're feeling bold and you're in a normal time, say, hey, I want to pay 5% below invoice. Send that out to a whole bunch of dealers and see if anyone bites. So that's step one, get that locked in. And I should mention, I'm not going to talk about trade-ins here. They should be treated as a completely separate transaction. There's probably a ton of videos on YouTube about how to negotiate trade-ins versus car prices and all that stuff. Just, I would focus on get the price that you actually want for your new vehicle, and then say, oh, I have a trade-in, or better yet, do a private sale, take it to Carvana or one of those places that kind of quotes you and makes it relatively simple to get rid of your vehicle, and keep that separate from buying a new car. Back to our forum, once you've got your price settled, you've got that negotiated, you're feeling good about it, fantastic. Element 2 of the equation is manufacturer rebates. Sometimes these are called factory incentives. They'll have kind of different funny names, but at the end of the day, what they are is it's the manufacturer of the vehicle giving money to you, the consumer. So from a dealer perspective, this is a wash. So I'm going to use simplified numbers here, but if I buy a $10,000 vehicle and there's a $1,000 manufacturer rebate, if I go to that dealer and say, hey, I want to pay 10 grand, from the dealer's perspective, they collect $10,000 from you, then the manufacturer then this happens instantly, but the manufacturer kind of gives the dealer $1,000, then the dealer takes that $1,000 and gives it to you. So from the dealer's perspective, it's a $0 transaction. They get $1,000 from the manufacturer, they give $1,000 to you, so it washes. The reason I mentioned that that's element number 2 of your pricing is this should not have any effect on the price you negotiate with the dealer. Again, it's a $0 transaction from the dealer's perspective. The manufacturer gives them a bunch of money, they give that same amount of money to you. What some of the shady dealers will do is they'll negotiate a price with you and they'll just skip over the manufacturer rebates and they'll use those to lower your price. So what do I mean by that? So if you negotiate the right way, again, let's use the example of our $10,000 car. Let's say it has an invoice price of $9,000. I negotiate that down, dealer says, okay, $9,000 is the price, sounds good. And then there's a $1,000 manufacturer rebate. That $1,000 goes to the manufacturer, to the dealer, to me. I end up paying $8,000. From the dealer's perspective, they actually sold me the car for $9,000 because again, that was this kind of $0 wash transaction. So dealer's happy, got their $9,000. I'm happy, I only paid $8,000. Manufacturer's happy, they do these incentives to move inventory, to take market share for a variety of reasons. But essentially it's money that doesn't impact the dealership. What a shady dealer will do is I'll say, hey, I want this vehicle for $9,000. They'll take the $1,000 from the manufacturer and they won't give it to you. So they'll say, hey, I'll give it to you for the $9,000 you asked for. In this case, the dealer's actually making more money. They're making $10,000 because they took the grant from the manufacturer, kept it in their pocket, and asked you for $9,000. So watch out for that kind of stuff. The way you avoid it is you negotiate that price up front, and then being a savvy person, you did your homework in advance, you know the rebates, and you say, all right, here's the rebates I'm eligible for. I'd like those deducted from that price that we negotiated. In the case of Ford, again, there's this scarcity thing going on now, so there aren't a lot of good rebates out there. There was a $1,000 rebate for special ordering. That's one of the ones that I got. I essentially got $1,600 of rebates. There's a $100 rebate that I think just applies to anyone. I think it's, Ford just kind of throwing folks a bone. And then I got a $500 rebate for being a member of my state farm association. I know nothing about the Farmers Bureau. I think some states have them, some don't. I looked on the website. It seemed like a nice, wholesome organization that helps small farmers. I didn't do any research beyond that, so they may be a Marxist-Leninist insurgent organization arming and supporting rebellious, penguins or something like that. But in any event, you get $500 back if you're a member. What you have to do to get that is join for 30 days, fill out a form online that takes about 6 seconds, and you get this little certificate you take to your dealer, and then they knock $500 off. There's similar stuff if you're a recent college grad. I think there's stuff for educators, so students or teachers. There's firefighters and EMTs. There's military. So there's a variety of these incentives. You can find them on the manufacturer website. A lot of them you have to they're special. So I can't get one for being a medical worker or an ex-military person because I'm not either of those things. So you do in some cases have to prove that you're a member of that organization. In other cases, they're just a general rebate. The other thing that Ford does specifically that, again, they're not doing now because of the supply chain shortage, is they'll give what's called a PCO, which I believe stands for private cash offer. And it's this email that says, hey, you bought something from us in the past, or you subscribe to one of our lists, or for whatever reason, if you buy a Ford vehicle in the next 3 months, we'll give you a $3,000 rebate. So they're pretty lucrative. Again, there's none of them going around right now from what I understand. All the ones that were issued have expired. You negotiate your truck price with the dealer, and then you can take off that $3,000. Maybe you're a farmer, teacher, military person, maybe you can check all three, and you throw another $1,500 in there, and you can really get a significant discount off the price. What to watch for in that space, aside from the dealers pulling that shady little trick that I mentioned before, is a lot of times you'll go on dealer websites and you'll see, internet price, and they'll have this, fantastic number that's flashing and bright lights and whatever, and they'll have a little asterisk beside it. And if you look wherever that asterisk is, it'll say something like, internet price assumes eligibility for all rebates. And you'll go and look at what those are. Again, it's probably buried somewhere on the website. And it's if you're, an ex-military, firefighter, EMT who recently graduated college, who's a farmer, likes, humor and Mel Gibson movies, or some bizarre combination that no one will have. So the dealer uses that fabulous internet price to get you in the door. And then when you sit down at the negotiating table, says, sorry, you're not eligible for all these things. And the price is going to look less good than it did when you walked in. So third element that you can also negotiate, although this is where things get a little more sticky, is dealer add-ons. So the first one that unfortunately I believe is fairly universal is the doc fee or documentation fee. Most states allow these, as far as I know. Most states, or some states, will cap them. In theory, it's a fee that reimburses the dealer for all the paperwork they have to file, all the work they do on your behalf to execute the transaction. It's kind of a goofy idea. It's kind of like going into the grocery store and buying a pound of bologna, and then you check out, they're like, hey, your bologna's $3, but there's a $1 charge because we put it in the little Ziploc baggie and we had to print out the receipt, and somebody had to work that big thing that slices the bologna or whatnot. I personally believe they should just build that into the cost. I think they do, or they did when they initially started selling cars. And then some brilliant person who's probably in the car dealer sleazebag hall of fame said, hey, we can put this documentation fee on and these jokers will actually pay for it. Those are negotiable. They're usually printed, kind of pre-printed on the dealer forms that you'll see, and they vary from dealer to dealer. So my local dealers had, 5, 6, I think in one case I saw an $800 doc fee, which is just completely ridiculous. In Granger's case, it was $180. It's just at that point, it's not worth negotiating. And, yes, the dealer does have to do some things to make the transaction happen. And in Granger's case, they made it fairly smooth. So I felt a lot less disused by paying that $180 fee. What I've seen happen, I've gotten dealers to drop it sometimes in the past, and they'll leave it on that pre-printed form and just take another, if it's a $400 doc fee, they'll take $400 off the transaction price somewhere. Doc fees kind of is what it is. Shop around to your dealers a little bit. If you see a dealer with a fantastic price, just make sure they're not going to do anything goofy to you on the doc fee. The other fees that you have to watch out for, so there's all sorts of ridiculous dealer add-ons. These could be anything from gap insurance, which sounds like a good idea because it theoretically covers you if, the example I always give is, what if you drive the car off the lot and get T-boned by a semi and the insurance company says your $60,000 car that you just paid for is only worth 50, so you're kind of 10 grand in the hole. That generally doesn't happen if you have good insurance. A lot of insurance policies will actually have gap insurance built in. You can get gap insurance fairly cheap on the open market. The dealers put a pretty large markup on all these things, so I would generally just say no to all that stuff. And that includes extended warranties, that includes like tire and rim protection. The other goofy ones is they'll have nitrogen fill in the tires and charge like $80 for it, and it's literally $3 worth of gas from a tank, and it doesn't really have that much benefit. You'll see things like pinstriping, you'll see window tinting, and I've seen dealers talk up like, 3M is one of the best tint manufacturers in the business, and we use only 3M tint, and it's a mere $500 to have this spectacular tint put on your vehicle. And yes, 3M does make some good lines of tint, but like anything, they have a low-end line, a high-end line, and they put the bottom of the barrel stuff on there. Had the summer intern apply it, so there's bubbles and it's all janky and everything, and you can just put tint on yourself for way less money. One of my favorites that I've seen is there's a dealership near me that charges this the big heavy custom package supposedly on all their vehicles, and it's the bad 3M tint, it's the nitrogen fill. They'll put like a real cheesy pinstripe decal on, and then they'll say they offer stolen vehicle recovery. And I said, well, what's that? And they're like, LoJack. And I, yes, I knew of LoJack. And I said, well, it's either LoJack or a LoJack equivalent. And I delved a little deeper, and it turns out that in the case of the vehicle I was looking at, it was a LoJack equivalent, which was the stuff the manufacturer already built in. Most modern cars have what's called telematics. It's the little GPS thing, and they can send data up to the manufacturer. So if your car is stolen, you can call the manufacturer and say, hey, got stolen. They send a signal out, they figure out where the vehicle is, and hopefully call the police. So the dealer is basically charging for something that you got for free already. I would just say no to all that stuff. And if the dealer says, well, it's already on there, then my response is, hey, take it off. Usually that's impossible. So if it is something that's interesting or valuable to you, make sure, I would say, hey, just take it off, and then act like you're a little bit put off and see if they'll give you a discount to the point where it's valuable to you. But I definitely wouldn't pay for nitrogen. I wouldn't pay for pinstriping or any of that goofball stuff. The nice thing about ordering a vehicle is you don't have to deal with all that. You can explicitly say, I don't want the big heavy special put on my vehicle when it arrives. So then final part of the price, and ultimately you add all these things up and it gets you to your out the door price, which is sort of your final sanity check to make sure you're getting the deal you expected, is government fees. And these are things that you can't negotiate. So usually these are, tax, title, and license. So that's the actual fee charged by the state to produce your registration and title and all that stuff. You can find those on your state DMV website, so you can make sure the dealer's not playing any games there. Generally, I've never seen a dealer do that. I think they would probably get in trouble if they did. You might see something like a sales tax, obviously, if your state charges that. You might see something like a separate road tax or road fee or something. Just go to your state's DMV website, and usually there's a section for new cars, and you can get an idea of all those fees and what they are, and you can make sure that kind of jives with what you're expecting. In the case of the vehicle I purchased from Granger, and when you purchase generally out of state, they will not charge you sales tax. The exception is if you're in Southern Connecticut and you buy a car in New York, or kind of states that border each other closely, usually they can collect the sales tax and do all the paperwork for you. In my case with Granger, was pretty far away. So what they do is they charge $45, which is a state of Iowa fee for a transit tag. So essentially it's kind of a temporary license plate that's good for 15 days, I believe. Then their state sends me a temporary title. I bring that into the DMV in my state. I have to pay sales tax. I have to pay all my state registration and title fees, which I'm not looking forward to because it's going to be a little bit of a kick in the rear end. But in any event, you pay all that stuff and you get it officially tagged, title, licensed in your home state. Those are the 4 elements to the fees. Again, Granger made it easy for me, but if you are trying to buy this somewhere else, just make sure you understand how those 4 play against each other, particularly the rebates, the invoice price, and some of those dealer add-ons. And the reason it's important to kind of negotiate those separately but think about them together is dealers may try and sneak money into one or all of those. So they may give you a great discount, they may give you a price that's below invoice, but then they'll charge you, a $2,000 special package fee for, $4 worth of nitrogen in your tires. So just be aware of that kind of stuff. So to bring this home, I think I've hopefully given you the skinny on why I went with Granger. Again, it was super easy. Everything was via email, except where I needed to be by phone. The folks were great to deal with. They picked me up at the airport. Everything was pretty flawless. I think the only frustrating aspect of the transaction was unrelated to Granger and was just related to the fact that Ford is so backed up that their usual timeline kind of got messed up. In particular, my truck was manufactured in Detroit. It goes via train to Kansas City, and they can track where it is. I could call Chip, and he knew pretty much to a 10-mile radius where on the railroads my truck was. But then I guess from what I understand is when it gets to Kansas City, it kind of sits on a lot and it comes up on a transport truck. No one knows when that truck's going to leave. No one knows how long you're going to sit, and basically you can kind of track everything and see everything until you get to that lot in Kansas City, and then the next thing you hear is, hey, truck just showed up. So otherwise it was largely flawless. And just to give you the breakdown of how everything worked. So first off, if you're going to use Granger, I would go to Ford.com and configure the truck or whatever vehicle you're buying the way you want it. They have a build and price tool in there. You can go and read about all the different options, all the different trims. And it is somewhat confusing. There's a lot of options with the F-150s. I think there's a lot of options with most of their vehicles now. The Broncos have all sorts of stuff. And don't hesitate to give Chip a call and just say, hey, what's the difference between a Lariat and a Platinum? It looks like this is the same, but that's different. Can you kind of help me break it down? There's some Ford forums out there that I'll put up somewhere on the screen that you can check out, where you can get all sorts of advice and guidance and read all sorts of experiences from various people. But ultimately, once you've got that vehicle configured more or less how you like it, send a screenshot, or I think you can do a printout of your configuration from Ford to Chip. He'll give you back a similar sheet that doesn't have all the nice pictures and all the pretty stuff, but essentially shows you the price and invoice price of all the different options, and then has Granger's final price in there, which again is that kind of first element of those 4 pricing elements that we talked about. And that's, they show it to you as price off of invoice, which in my professional opinion is how it should be done. Once you've got that build sheet, again, double, triple check it, just make sure everything you want is in there. There were no problems with my build, other than the fact that I changed my mind on a couple things after I got the draft sheet. Once you're happy with that, give Chip a call. They take a $500 deposit over the phone. I'm sure you could send them a check. I used a credit card, both because I could get points, and if something went horribly wrong, the credit card company tends to side with consumers. So you kind of have that as a little bit of a fail-safe. And once you do that, you sign a build sheet electronically, and then my understanding is Chip puts that order into some kind of Ford system, which gives you an order number. And then after a few days, you get a VIN, which is a vehicle identification number. It's that ridiculously long number you see printed on every car that's on the roads, and is essentially sort of the serial number of that individual vehicle. And with those 2 items, you can go to Ford's tracking tool. And Ford has an official one. There's a few different ones out there that essentially pull this information from the same place, but that will show you where your vehicle sits in the production process. It'll kind of go from scheduled, which means Ford has put it on the calendar to be built, to build, to complete and shipped, and it'll kind of let you follow along the way. And you can read all sorts of things in the various forums about other tracking tools that are out there. But if you're a relatively patient person, it'll be not that long a wait, and you'll have more than enough information. If you're somebody that spends too much time on these truck forums and potentially sold your vehicle 2 months before and is a 1-car family now and a little bit frustrated like me, you may be hitting refresh every day and going a bit bananas when things don't seem to be moving. But rest assured that eventually Ford will build your truck. It will eventually arrive at the dealer, at which point, in my case, Granger called me. They asked for some financing information. They will go and pull loan rates for you if you want. I'd also recommend shopping around a little bit, particularly if you use a credit union or if you have access to some sort of special banking. In my case, I got a great rate from Bank of America, so you can use your own financing. Again, pre-arrange something with somebody that you use just so you have something to compare it to, I think is always a good option. And then book your flights. So I made either the mistake or the really smart move, depending on how you look at it, of going off of Ford's estimated arrival date at Granger and booked some flights for that time. With COVID, thankfully the airlines will let you reschedule flights without a change fee. They will charge you any difference in fares or refund you the difference in fares. So I think I had to reschedule my flights 3 or 4 times because my truck was in Kansas City when they said it would be. but it sat there for a couple weeks, and again, no one could tell what was going on. But ultimately, got out to Des Moines. Granger was good enough to pick me up out there, took me to the dealership, was able to check out the truck, make sure everything looked like it was in ship shape. The signing process was uneventful, aside from being pitched some extended warranties and gap insurance and some of the stuff that frustrates me a little bit, but ultimately didn't need to bring anything with me other than my driver's license. I had previously sent proof of insurance, and I just had a credit card to put down the remainder of the down payment that I wanted. And I think I brought along my little Farm Bureau certificate, although I didn't need that. I had sent that in, and all that was ready to go. So flawless transaction, super easy. Chip walked me through the vehicle. I had watched 6 billion YouTube videos prior to that, so felt relatively familiar with the truck, despite having never owned one in the past. They did help me set up my phone and activate the Ford Pass app and do all that good stuff. And my strategy was, I probably got out to Des Moines. I think I landed at like 4. By the time I was done with all the paperwork for the truck, it was probably 5:36-ish. And I didn't want to really get on the road after having sat on 2 planes that day. So I booked a hotel in Des Moines, drove the truck down. It was a pretty interesting city. Had a beer and a burger at a place that was pretty good. Got a decent night of sleep, and then hit the road bright and early and made my way back to where I was. The only other recommendation I'd offer is, these trucks have CarPlay and Android Auto. Load yourself up with a few good podcasts, or you can just get a Rockin' Mix and enjoy your time on the road. So if I were to do this again, would I use Granger? I would say 90% yes. The only negative to the entire process, to the entire transaction, was the fact that there was a 20-hour drive to get back to where I'm staying for the summer. And I'm staying up in the mountains of New Hampshire, so I had to take a couple planes out there. There's not a lot of options to get to Des Moines. It's not the easiest airport in the United States to get to. Then you just got to kind of gut out that long drive. And there's certainly some scenic routes I could have taken, but in the interest of getting home quickly and trying to do a 20-ish hour drive instead of a 30-ish or 40-hour drive, you're just kind of bombing down highways, seeing if you can avoid the traffic around Chicago and get home as quickly as you can. So I'd say that was the only negative. The only other negative was the weight, but that balances out with the fact that when you special order, you do have that weight, but you also get exactly what you want. And that's down to color, that's down to options. I can't remember exactly how many options there are for these different trucks, or for these trucks, but in the F-150 series, there's like 5 trims. There's a couple different package levels within those trims, and there's probably a half dozen add-ons that you could put on there. Everything from max tow to power running boards to flip out work surfaces. So there's probably tens of thousands of configurations of F-150s that you could build. So your chance of finding exactly what you want on a dealer lot is pretty slim. So in this case, you get exactly what you want. You get something fresh off the assembly line. My vehicle, when I picked it up, had 10 miles on it. So it's not been beating around a dealer lot for 4 months and having people get a little freaky with the gas pedal on you or doing anything goofy like that. So aside from the fact that I ended up sitting on my butt for 20 hours wheeling that sucker home, it was a flawless transaction, and I'd highly recommend using Granger Ford, particularly if you have an F-150, a Bronco, or they're also doing reservations for the Lightning. And I think on that truck, they're doing a flat $1,000 below invoice. So tough to go wrong if you don't mind a drive. And this is the Big Heavy. And maybe I'll see you out there on the road in your shiny new truck too. Peace.